What would you do if everything you thought you'd built, a loving marriage, a loyal family, a stable life, was ripped apart in an instant? That's exactly what happened to me. It started on a seemingly ordinary evening when I came home early, holding a bottle of wine and plans for a romantic dinner. But instead of finding the woman I loved, I found my wife, Lily, tangled up in a web of betrayal with the last person I ever expected, my own nephew. That moment shattered me. Years of being the quiet, dependable man who put others first came crashing down. But what happened next? That's where the story really begins. Because this isn't just a tale of heartbreak. It's about transformation. About a man who finally stood up, faced the people who betrayed him, and rebuilt his life brick by brick. It's about revenge served cold, finding unexpected love, and proving that even when everything is taken from you, you can rise stronger than ever. So buckle up, because this story is messy, raw, and full of twists you won't see coming. It's not just about losing everything. It's about finding yourself in the ashes. You know how they say life can turn on a dime? Well, mine turned on a bottle of wine. That day started out normal enough. I had left work early, armed with a plan to surprise my wife, Lily, with her favorite meal and a bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon. We'd been drifting apart lately, not for any dramatic reason, just the slow grind of life. Work, bills, and the endless loop of routines. Tonight, I wanted to change that. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed an extra car parked out front. It was my nephew Jake's beat-up Honda Civic. Jake, the 24-year-old family golden boy, with his easy smile and endless stories about his adventures, was the kind of guy who could charm a nun out of her rosary. I didn't think much of it. Jake visited now and then. He'd always been close to Lily, who treated him like the little brother she never had. I stepped inside, the quiet hitting me like a wall. Normally, Lily would be in the kitchen, humming along to some indie playlist. But today, nothing. Just the faint scent of her lavender candle lingering in the air. "Lily," I called out. My voice echoed back. I set the wine on the counter, a small part of me already uneasy. Something was off. As I moved through the house, I noticed a trail, Jake's sneakers near the couch, his keys on the coffee table, and then faint laughter coming from upstairs. It was Lily's laugh, but not the laugh I knew. This one was different, soft, flirtatious, almost intimate. My stomach twisted. I climbed the stairs slowly, each creak of the wood beneath me loud enough to rival my heartbeat. The door to our bedroom was ajar, a sliver of light spilling into the hallway. I could hear their voices now, low and murmuring, but clear enough to catch snippets. "Stop, you're going to get us caught," Lily whispered, giggling. "Relax," came Jake's voice, smooth as butter. "He's not home yet." My hand tightened around the bottle of wine. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to charge in, but I froze. I don't know why, maybe some part of me hoped this wasn't what it looked like. But then I pushed the door open just enough to see. Lily was sitting on the edge of the bed, her face flushed, her hair tousled. Jake stood in front of her, his hand on her shoulder, leaning in close. My stomach dropped like a stone. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. The sound made them both turn. Lily's eyes widened in horror, and Jake? Jake just smirked, like this was all some big joke. "Hey, Uncle Matt," he said casually, as if I'd walked in on a poker game instead of whatever this was. And just like that, the dime turned. My life, as I knew it, would never be the same again. For a moment, nobody moved. The room was frozen in this bizarre tableau. Lily scrambling to pull her robe tighter, Jake still smirking like he was the star of some twisted sitcom, and me standing there with a death grip on the wine bottle, my knuckles white. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. Words felt useless, like throwing pebbles at a hurricane. So, I just turned and walked out, each step deliberate, heavy. "Matt, wait," Lily called after me, her voice cracking with panic. But I didn't wait. I made it downstairs, placed the wine bottle on the kitchen counter with unsettling precision, and then leaned against the sink, gripping its edge so hard it felt like I might rip it off. My chest heaved, anger bubbling just under the surface, but I refused to let it boil over. Not yet. Behind me, I heard the hurried shuffle of feet on the stairs. "Matt, please," Lily started, her voice trembling. Let me explain. Explain what? I snapped, spinning around so fast she flinched. Explain why my wife and my nephew are sneaking around in our bedroom while I'm out buying you wine for a romantic dinner? Jake sauntered in, the picture of unbothered confidence. He leaned casually against the doorway, arms crossed. Look, Uncle Matt, this isn't what you think. Shut your mouth, I barked, my voice loud enough to rattle the windows. That wiped the smirk off his face. Matt, listen, Lily pleaded, stepping between us like she thought I might lunge at him. Honestly, the thought had crossed my mind. It's complicated. Complicated, I echoed, my voice dripping with venom. Yeah, I bet it is. So, untangle it for me. Right now. Go ahead, Lily. Because from where I'm standing, it looks pretty damn simple. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. I watched as her face twisted, a grotesque mix of guilt and desperation. It wasn't supposed to happen, she finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. What? You accidentally tripped and fell into an affair? I spat. Give me a break, Lily. How long has this been going on? She hesitated, her eyes darting to Jake, who had the nerve to look annoyed. Lily, I pressed, my voice low, dangerous. How long? 6 months, she said, so quietly I almost didn't hear her. 6 months. Half a year. Half a year of lies. I nodded slowly, letting the numbers settle into my bones like ice. And you, I said, pointing at Jake, you had no problem betraying your own family? Sneaking around with your uncle's wife? What kind of person does that? Jake shrugged, his smugness creeping back in. Look, you weren't exactly paying attention to her, were you? Someone had to. The audacity hit me like a freight train. My hands balled into fists, my vision tunneling. For a split second, I considered smashing that wine bottle right over his head, but I didn't. Instead, I laughed. Not a warm, happy laugh, but the kind that sent chills down your spine. You think this is funny? I said, my voice eerily calm now. You think you've won? Jake raised an eyebrow, confused by the sudden shift in tone. Let me tell you something, kid, I said, stepping closer, towering over him. You just made the worst mistake of your life. Both of you. And with that, I grabbed my coat, walked out the front door, and into the cold night air. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Growing up, my younger brother, Brandon, was always the golden child. The universe just seemed to hand him everything on a silver platter. Money, charm, good looks. He had it all. Meanwhile, I was the awkward one. The quiet kid with a head full of worries and a heart weighed down by a sadness I couldn't explain. Brandon and I couldn't have been more different if we tried. He was the star quarterback. I was the kid in the bleachers who read history books between plays. He had girls lining up to fawn over him, and well, let's just say my prom date was my cousin, arranged by our mom to get me out of the house. And as if life hadn't already handed him enough, Brandon had a knack for making money out of thin air. He barely scraped through college, yet somehow landed a cushy job in sales that quickly ballooned into running his own business. By the time I was paying off my first beat-up Honda, Brandon was cruising around town in a brand-new convertible, waving to everyone like the mayor of some gilded empire. I'll admit it, I was jealous. How could I not be? He made life look easy, while I felt like I was trudging through a storm that never ended. But then something happened that flipped the script. I met Lily. From the moment I saw her, everything about my life made sense. She was radiant, with a laugh that could light up the darkest corners of my mind. She wasn't just beautiful. She was kind, driven, and had a way of making me feel like I was worth something. For the first time, I felt like I had one. Getting married to Lily felt like pulling off the heist of the century. Not only did I have a woman I adored, but I had something my brother could never seem to hold on to. A real family. Oh, sure, Brandon had his flings and his flashy girlfriends, but none of them ever lasted. His relationships burned bright and fast, leaving him with nothing but expensive gifts returned in garbage bags and a reputation for being fun but not husband material. It became a quiet point of pride for me. For once, I had something Brandon didn't. I had stability, love, a home filled with warmth instead of hollow laughter and empty champagne bottles. Of course, I never rubbed it in his face. I didn't have to. Brandon would joke about how domestic life wasn't for him. But I saw the way his eyes flickered when he came over for dinner and watched Lily and me steal glances at each other across the table. And then there was Jake, his son, my nephew. Jake was just like his father, charming, good-looking, and a magnet for trouble. Brandon loved to brag about how Jake was the ultimate lady killer in the making, but deep down, I knew he was just trying to hide the cracks in their father-son relationship. Jake respected Brandon the same way a cat respects a laser pointer. He played along, but only because it amused him. I'd always try to be a positive influence on Jake, to show him there was more to life than charm and quick thrills. And for a while, I thought I'd gotten through to him. Until now. Now, as I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles ached, I couldn't stop replaying the image of Jake in my bedroom, standing there like he owned the place. Like I was the outsider. Jake, Brandon's son, was sneaking around with Lily, the woman who had saved me from the darkest parts of myself, the woman who had given me a reason to believe in happiness. And suddenly, all those years of Brandon's shadow came crashing down on me again. I had built my life brick by brick, clawing my way out of depression and self-doubt, and for the first time, I'd thought I was untouchable. But now, it felt like the universe was laughing in my face. Brandon's son hadn't just betrayed me. He'd reminded me of every fear I'd ever buried, every whispered voice in my head that told me I didn't deserve the life I'd built. But as the engine idled and the night wrapped around me, a new thought began to take shape. This wasn't over. Jake, Brandon, Lily, they thought they'd taken everything from me. But they didn't realize something important. I wasn't the man I used to be. I wasn't the scared, overshadowed brother anymore. And if they wanted to play games, they had no idea who they were up against. I spent the night driving, the hum of the engine my only companion. My mind was a battlefield of anger, betrayal, and something I hadn't felt in a long time. Clarity. My whole life, I had been the guy who swallowed his pride, kept his head down, and let the world walk all over him. I let Brandon outshine me. I let Jake run wild under the illusion I could mentor him. I let Lily pull me into a false sense of security while she carried on with someone else under my own roof. Not anymore. When dawn broke, I wasn't exhausted. I was alive. Something inside me had snapped, and the pieces that came back together weren't the same. I wasn't just angry. I was determined. If they thought they could destroy me, they were about to learn what happens when you corner a man who has nothing left to lose. I parked outside a gym I'd driven past 1,000 times but never entered. I hated gyms. Always felt like they were filled with people who didn't struggle like I did. But today, I walked in like I owned the place. The receptionist barely glanced up. "You looking for a membership?" "Yeah," I said. "The kind where they teach you how to fight." She looked at me over the rims of her glasses, one eyebrow raised. "We've got boxing, MMA, and self-defense. Sign me up for all three." And that was how it started. Over the next few months, I rebuilt myself. Every punch I threw, every weight I lifted, every bead of sweat was a brick in the wall I was building around my old self. The version of me who had been walked on, pitted, and cheated on was dead. I didn't stop there. I found a lawyer, one of those cutthroat types who didn't waste time with niceties. I handed her everything. The receipts of my life, the proof of Lily's affair, and the quiet financial discrepancies I'd uncovered while digging through our accounts. "Get me everything I deserve," I told her. Her smile was sharp. "Oh, I'll do more than that." Brandon was next. The thing about my brother was that he had the kind of arrogance that came with never being held accountable. His business, his reputation, his entire persona relied on people believing he was untouchable. So, I touched it. I started small, anonymous tips to the IRS about his creative accounting practices, a quiet conversation with a journalist about his less-than-savory business dealings. By the time I was done, his perfect life was crumbling. Jake? Oh, Jake was a special case. I didn't come at him with fists, though God knows I wanted to. Instead, I dismantled him piece by piece. I went to his college and exposed the fake essays and plagiarized papers he'd been submitting for years. I made sure his employers knew about the skeletons in his closet. When Jake finally called me, his voice panicked and desperate, I didn't yell or gloat. "You thought you were untouchable," I said. "How does it feel to lose everything you didn't deserve in the first place?" And then I hung up. But the biggest blow was reserved for Lily. I filed for divorce, obviously, but I didn't just walk away. I took the house, the car, and every last shred of security she had. My lawyer made sure of it. Lily went from a comfortable suburban life to crashing on her sister's couch. I could have left it at that, but I wasn't done. One night, I showed up at her sister's place with the signed papers. Lily came to the door, her face pale and drawn. "You really hate me that much?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Hate you?" I said, laughing coldly. "No, Lily, I don't hate you. I just finally see you for who you really are. And that's worse." I handed her the papers, turned, and walked away without looking back. In the aftermath, I found myself in a place I never expected, free. One day, after a training session, I stopped at a cafe downtown. That's where I met Mia. She was nothing like Lily, bold, confident, with a wicked sense of humor and eyes that felt like they could see straight through you. We clicked immediately. Over time, I told her everything, not just about Lily, Jake, and Brandon, but about the old me, the scared, quiet man who let life happen to him instead of grabbing it by the reins. "You're not that guy anymore," she said one night, her hand resting on mine. "And whoever you were back then, he'd be proud of who you are now." For the first time in years, I believed it. I didn't just find a new companion in Mia. I found a new version of myself, one who wasn't afraid to stand tall, fight back, and claim the life he deserved. And this time, nobody was going to take it from me. By the time the divorce was finalized, I was a new man. Not just in my own eyes, but in the eyes of everyone who had underestimated me. Word about what I'd done had spread, like some kind of suburban legend. The quiet, unassuming Matt everyone thought they knew had torched his old life and emerged as someone they couldn't ignore. Brandon, for one, wasn't taking it well. His business empire had been hollowed out thanks to the quiet financial wrecking ball I'd sent its way. Lawsuits, audits, and a media storm had left him grasping at the scraps of his once gilded life. He tried calling me, but I never picked up. That didn't stop him from cornering me at a family function one day. It was one of those awkward extended family gatherings where everyone pretends they aren't silently taking sides. I wasn't planning to go, but Mia had insisted. "Let them see you," she'd said. "They need to know you're not hiding anymore." So, I went. Brandon showed up late, as always, strutting in like he was still the king of the world. But the whispers followed him. Everyone knew what had happened, even if they didn't know it was my doing. He zeroed in on me the second he walked in, his face a mask of poorly concealed fury. "Matthew," he said, plastering on a fake smile as he pulled me aside. I crossed my arms, matching his smile with a cool one of my own. "Brandon, enjoying the party?" "Cut the crap," he hissed, his voice low. "I know you're behind this. All of it." I tilted my head, feigning ignorance. "Behind what? Your bad decisions catching up with you? I think you've got me confused with karma." His jaw tightened. "You've made your point. You've humiliated me, destroyed my business, turned everyone against me. What more do you want?" I leaned in, my voice cold as ice. "What I wanted was for you and your son to respect me. But since you couldn't do that, I settled for showing you what happens when you mess with the wrong person." Brandon's face turned red, but before he could say another word, Mia appeared at my side, slipping her arm through mine like it had always belonged there. "Everything okay here?" she asked sweetly, her sharp eyes flicking to Brandon. "Just catching up," I said. Brandon muttered something under his breath and stormed off. "Let me guess," Mia said, watching him retreat. "He thought he could intimidate you?" I smirked. "He's used to people rolling over. Not anymore." As much as Brandon's downfall felt like a victory, the real satisfaction came from what I'd done to Jake. After exposing his plagiarism and getting him booted from college, he'd spiraled. His charm couldn't save him anymore. Every door that had once been open to him slammed shut. One night, I got a text from an unknown number. "Jake, I'm sorry. For everything. Please, can we talk?" I stared at the message for a long time before typing back. "Me, you'll figure it out. Maybe the next time you stand in someone else's shoes, you'll think twice before betraying them." Then I blocked him. As for Lily, I thought I was done with her until I ran into her at a grocery store one afternoon. She looked different, smaller, more fragile, like the world had crushed her under its heel. "Matt," she said, her voice shaky, "can we talk?" "I don't think we have anything left to say," I replied, cool but not cruel. Her eyes brimmed with tears. "I don't expect forgiveness. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I made the worst mistake of my life, and I lost everything because of it." For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "You didn't lose everything, Lily," I said. "You threw it away." And with that, I walked past her, my head held high. In the months that followed, I poured myself into my new life with Mia. She challenged me, pushed me, and reminded me every day that I deserved happiness. Together, we traveled, laughed, and built something real, something unshakable. One evening, as we stood on the balcony of our new apartment, watching the city lights twinkle below, she turned to me. "You've come a long way, you know," she said. I nodded, a quiet pride swelling in my chest. I had to lose everything to find myself, but I'm not looking back. And I wasn't. I wasn't the man they could break anymore. I was stronger. I was free. And I was finally living the life I deserved. With the ghosts of my past fading into the rearview mirror, I realized that starting over wasn't just about revenge or even finding peace. It was about proving to myself that I could build something better, not just for me, but for the future I'd never dared to imagine. Mia and I were in lockstep from the beginning. She had this way of cutting through my self-doubt, pushing me to take the risks I'd always been too cautious to try. One night, over dinner in a hole-in-the-wall Italian restaurant, she floated an idea that planted a seed in my mind. "Why don't you do something for yourself?" she asked, twirling her fork lazily in her pasta. "I thought I was," I replied, confused. "No," she said, leaning closer. "I mean really for yourself. Something that excites you. Something that's yours." That conversation stuck with me. Weeks later, I sat in a small office I'd rented downtown, staring at a whiteboard covered in half-baked ideas. I'd always been good at logistics, planning, organizing, seeing patterns in chaos. And that's when it hit me. I could turn those skills into something real. I launched a business consultancy, the kind of operation that didn't just fix broken companies, but helped people like me, underdogs, realize their potential. Mia dubbed it Reforge because, as she put it, you're taking broken pieces and making something stronger. The name stuck. At first, it was just me, one laptop, and a lot of late nights. But word spread quickly. Small businesses struggling to survive came to me looking for guidance, and before I knew it, I had a team of like-minded people who believed in what we were building. Within a year, Reforge wasn't just thriving. It was redefining what I thought success could look like. The irony wasn't lost on me that while Brandon's empire crumbled, mine was rising. One day, as I walked through our sleek new office space, one of my team members flagged me down. "Matt, there's someone in the lobby asking to see you," she said, her tone cautious. "He didn't have an appointment, but he says it's urgent." I raised an eyebrow. Did he give a name? "Brandon," she said. My stomach tightened. I hadn't seen my brother in months, not since that family gathering where I'd let him know exactly where we stood. I found him pacing the lobby, looking like a shadow of the man he used to be. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his tie loosened like he'd just finished a losing argument. "Brandon," I said coolly, crossing my arms, "what brings you here?" He stopped pacing and turned to me, his expression a mix of desperation and shame. "I need your help," he said. I couldn't help but laugh, cold, bitter, and a little too loud for the quiet lobby. "My help?" I echoed. "That's rich." "Matt, please," he said, stepping closer. "You've made your point, okay? You've won. But my business is in ruins, and I don't have anyone else to turn to." I studied him for a moment, letting the weight of his words hang in the air. You know what's funny, Brandon? I said, my voice calm but razor sharp. I spent most of my life thinking I'd never measure up to you. But now, here you are, asking for a handout from the brother you treated like nothing more than a joke. He flinched, but to his credit, he didn't try to argue. You're right, he admitted. I was a terrible brother. But I'm asking now, not for me, but for Jake. He's struggling, Matt. You've proven your point with me, but don't let him suffer for my mistakes. Jake. His name hit me like a punch to the gut. I hadn't thought about him in months, and part of me preferred it that way. Jake made his own bed, I said finally. And so did you. Brandon opened his mouth to argue, but I held up a hand. I'll think about it, I said. That's the best you're getting from me. I turned and walked away, leaving him standing there in the lobby. When I got home that night, Mia was waiting for me on the couch, a glass of wine in her hand. Rough day? She asked, patting the spot next to her. Ran into Brandon, I said, sitting down and loosening my tie. She raised an eyebrow. Let me guess, he was looking for a lifeline? I nodded, running a hand through my hair. What are you going to do? She asked. I thought about it for a long moment, then sighed. I don't know yet, but whatever I decide, it's going to be on my terms, not his. She leaned her head on my shoulder, her warmth grounding me. That's my guy, she said softly. I wasn't the same Matt who'd once been crushed under the weight of betrayal. I was stronger now, smarter, and for the first time in my life, I was in control. Whatever came next, I was ready. Brandon's desperate plea rattled around in my head for days. The idea of helping him, of helping Jake, felt like dragging my hands back through the muck I'd fought so hard to climb out of. But something Mia said kept echoing in my mind. You've already won. What happens next is about who you want to be. So, I made a decision. Not for Brandon, not for Jake, but for me. I called Brandon to meet me at a coffee shop. He showed up looking rough, his usual swagger replaced by something I hadn't seen in him before. Humility. I thought about what you said, I began, setting my coffee down. And I'll help, but not for free, not without conditions. Brandon straightened, his hope almost pitiful. Anything, Matt. Name it. I leaned forward, my voice firm but not unkind. You work for it. No shortcuts, no handouts. You want my help, you'll earn it. And Jake? He's going to rebuild his life, not ride on your coattails or mine. You'll show him how to take responsibility for himself. Brandon nodded, the weight of my words sinking in. Deal. I wasn't sure if he'd follow through, but this wasn't about trust. It was about me choosing to let go. That chapter, that life, was over. The new chapter. Reforge flourished, expanding faster than I dreamed possible. Small businesses weren't just surviving. They were thriving, and knowing I had a hand in that felt more fulfilling than anything else I'd ever done. Mia stood beside me through every step, her sharp mind and unwavering support pushing me to heights I never thought I could reach. She wasn't just my partner. She was my equal, my co-conspirator in building the kind of life I'd always wanted but never dared to believe I deserved. Months turned into years, and one evening, while walking through a bustling downtown square with Mia, something unexpected happened. Dad? I turned to see Lucas, my youngest nephew, standing there. He looked different, more grounded, less of the cocky kid I remembered. He wasn't alone. Beside him was a young woman holding his hand, her warm smile a stark contrast to the tension in his. I mean, Uncle Matt, Lucas corrected, his voice unsteady. I smiled, surprising myself with how genuine it felt. Lucas. He took a deep breath, his eyes darting to Mia before settling back on me. I just wanted to say, I get it now, what you were trying to teach me, and I'm sorry. For everything. I studied him for a moment, searching for any sign of the arrogance that used to define him, but all I saw was sincerity. I appreciate that, I said, my tone soft but steady. It takes a lot to own up to your mistakes. His shoulders relaxed, and for the first time in years, I saw a glimmer of the man he could become. We didn't linger, but that brief interaction left me feeling lighter. Maybe, just maybe, the next generation of my family could escape the shadows of the past. The future unfolds. Over time. The scars of betrayal faded. Not completely. There were still moments when memories surfaced, unbidden and unwelcome. But those moments no longer defined me. One evening, Mia and I stood on the balcony of our home, the city lights stretching out before us like a map of possibility. She slipped her hand into mine, her head resting on my shoulder. "You've come a long way," she murmured. "So have we," I said, kissing her hair. She turned to me, her smile soft but teasing. "If someone had told me when I first met you that you'd turn into this unstoppable force of a man, I'd have said they were crazy." I laughed, the sound deep and genuine. "If someone had told me I'd end up with someone like you, I wouldn't have believed them either." The truth was, the life I'd rebuilt was more than I ever thought possible. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. For the first time in my life, I wasn't living in someone else's shadow. I wasn't surviving, I was thriving. And as the stars blinked into view above us, I realized something. The pain, the betrayal, the heartbreak, it had all been part of the journey that led me here. I had lost everything, but in losing it, I found myself. And that was worth everything.